Hello, welcome to Impact Resources in Orange. My name is Chelsea, and I want to share a few things with you guys on how to write and publish your own story. First off, allow me to start by saying I literally had to figure out how to mold myself on my own. Even recently establishing my own self-publishing company, there are still perks and kinks that I'm working through. But that doesn't stop me from pushing through the many failures I have faced and will face. Everyone has a story. Your life's battles and most joyous moments and how you manage to still find strength within you is your story. Here, I will give you the basics on putting your story on paper and sharing it for the world to see, but not for the world to judge or be opinionated, because that will happen either way. Your story will be for you to share and teach life to others in your own way through your many experiences. Enjoy. Find a strong, best-selling story idea. Choosing a strong, standout story idea is the first step towards publication. When you pitch a novel to publishers, your plot synopsis is the first thing people will notice, along with your credentials, the language and phrasing of your submission, and the title of your manuscript. What is a best-selling story idea? Your life's experiences is your best-selling story. You can immediately create interest by using some or all of the 5 W's: what, when, why, where, and who. Number one step is write in one sitting. Now, as as difficult as that may sound, it's actually a really pretty good idea. You basically need to find what is it that helps you to get into that zone for your mind to flow and create all the story that you want to put onto paper. Write the first draft of your story in as short time as possible. If you're writing a short story, try to write it in one sitting. If you're writing a novel, try to write it in one season. One season is considered 3 months. Don't worry too much about plotting or outlining beforehand. You can do that once you know the story that you have to tell in the first place. Your first draft is a discovery process. You're like an archaeologist digging an ancient city out of the clay. You might have a few clues about where your city is buried beforehand, but you don't know what it will look like until it's unearthed. With all that, let's just say start digging. Step 2, let's develop your protagonist. Stories are about protagonists, and if you don't have a good protagonist, you won't have a good story. The essential ingredient for every protagonist is they must make decisions. A human being is a deciding being, in the words of Viktor Frankl. Your protagonist must make a decision to get herself into whatever mess she gets into your story, and likewise, she must come to a crisis point and decide to get herself out of that same mess. To further develop your protagonist, use other characters like the villain, the protagonist's opposite, or the fool, a sidekick character that reveals the protagonist's softer side. You want to create suspense and drama in your story. What's a good story without any suspense and drama, right? To create a suspense, set up a dramatic question. A dramatic question can be like, is he going to make it? Is she going to get the man of her dreams? You need to put your protagonist's fate in doubt. You make the reader ask, what will happen next? And you need your reader to constantly ask, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? You want that suspense. You want them to keep on reading and keep wanting more and more. In order to do this very well, you need to carefully restrict the flow of information to the reader. Nothing destroys drama like oversharing. You never put too much emphasis on certain areas of your story. Don't give too much information. If you're giving too much information and too much details, they won't want to know what's next because they'll already figure it out. It's like watching a Lifetime movie and you already know what's going to happen because their flow is the same way and they're giving too many details. You want clues. You want to be able to give clues and hints, but not too much, not too many details. It's basically like a show, don't tell. Honestly, the saying show, don't tell is overused. However, when placed to the next step, it becomes very effective. When something interesting happens in your story that changes the fate of your character, don't tell us about it. Show the scene. Your readers have the right to be the best parts of your story play out in front of them. Show the interesting parts of your story and tell the rest. You have to give your readers the vision. You have to create a vision for your readers so they can see it while they are reading and they're anticipating and wondering what is going to happen next. Show, don't tell. Writing a good dialogue is very important. Good dialogue comes from 2 things: the intimate knowledge of your character and lots of rewriting. Each character must have a unique voice And make sure your characters all sound different. Read each character's dialogue and ask yourself, does this sound like my character? If your answer is no, then you have some rewriting to do. If you have a character, say Jessica, has a very open and spirited personality, and then Dawn is so conservative, they're going to talk different. Their personality should be different in your book. They shouldn't seem like the same person with different names. Also, with your speaker tags, try not to use things like "but he said" and "she said." Speaker tags are like "he exclaimed," "she announced," "he spoke vehemently," are distracting and unnecessary. The occasional "he asked" is fine. Now, honestly, the publishing steps that I am sharing with you about writing your story and publishing, I literally had to learn as I go and figure it out on my own. I was published to Wright House Publishing in 2015, and I started doing urban fiction novels. And had no clue about urban fiction novels, so I had to dig deep within myself with a lot of research and a lot of help from the publisher that I was with, to learn how to do these steps. And the more that I wrote, the more research that I did, the more that my writing became evolved. You can tell the difference from 2015 up until now. And in 2019, I shared my own publishing company under Lewis Royals LLC, that I have published a few books under there myself. But I'm more into the motivating and self-help, self-love, self-care. That is what I'm doing. So these steps can go for any type of book that you are working on, any genre, any story that you have to tell. There's always those basic steps. Whether it's your own story, whether it's your story with a twist of fiction, or whether it's just a fiction story whatsoever, you still need to make sure that these basic guideline steps are what you are using to start your story. One of the things that involves a good story is writing about death. Think about the last 5 novels that you read. If you haven't read anything, you're not ready to write your own story, because your own story it comes from your own experiences, but in order to be a writer, you have to be a reader as well. Good stories often involve death, like Harry Potter, The Hunger Games, Charlotte's Web, The Lord of Rings, and more. All of those had main characters that died. Death is like the universal theme, because every person who lives one day will die, period. That's just God honest truth, and we know that. So you have to tap the power of death into your storytelling. And you have to make sure that even within your story, you have to make sure you edit like a pro. Most professional writers write 3 drafts or more. The first draft is often called like your vomit draft. Don't share it with anyone. Your first draft is your chance to explore your story and figure out what it's about and what you are about. If your story idea calls for specialty research, do some quick preliminary research before you start drafting. Things you may need to research for your book are character professions, detail about real world settings. When I was writing my Hood Love on the Run book, I had to research different cities and what goes on in those cities, just for me to be able to give that vision of what my story was entailing. Historical details such as dates and events if you're writing about a realist fiction or historical fiction. How particular technology, political processes, or cultural practices work depending on the genre and your subject matter. This may seem like a lot to keep track of. This is why I'm doing the video instead of writing, but you can put together a basic research document. Putting together your research document, you can create a document and create headings corresponding to the letters of the alphabet. This will help you find relevant information quickly when writing if you need to. For example, for letter P, you can put professions, the professions of your characters. Here you can note down any important details about the jobs and what they entail. If their professions are essential to your story, as in medical, as in drama, add to your research document whenever you have any factual information that will be useful to your story. That way you can keep a timeline of what your story entails, and you can go back and forth. Once you feel they have the necessary basic information you need to write, plan your writing schedule and outline your book. It is very important to plan your writing schedule. because although our creative process may flow, it always flows at different times. It may have different things on a day-to-day basis that will spark your process. For me, it didn't matter what it was. I could be riding in a car, I could be dealing with something with my kids, at home, or cooking, or spending time with my husband, and something will just go off, and there goes my creative process. And the main thing for me was taking notes. You can do a notepad, but for me, what I normally do, because we have most of our phones now carries the notepad. So what I do is I'll jot down notes in my notepad, put a date on it, add a title to what subject, what chapter of the book, or what part of the book that notes are going to be going to. So that way when I actually go back to my notes, all I need to do is fill in the gap. Plan distraction free time. If you're like me, I am a wife and a mom, so I am always distracted, literally. So what is distraction free writing time? It's time that you put aside to focus completely on your writing. So many aspiring writers report not having time to write. That was me. Literally felt like I had zero time to write. But it's crucial to make time to write a book. We only make time for what we truly desire. If you don't have a plan that will help steer you to clear a writer's block, you could get stuck. Some writers swear pantsing, but remember the benefits of outlining a novel. You have a guideline roadmap for writing about a logical sequence of plottable events. You have greater freedom to shuffle narrative events around because you have a bird's eye view for your layout of your story. You can work on scenes from your novel out of your sequence if you like. You'll know how to stitch all things together for your outline. If you haven't outlined a book before, you can consider different outlining methods. I typed this and I am reading as I go, you guys. So let's see. Once you have an outline that you can use, it's time to set a deadline to get out your first draft. Set a manageable deadline and finish your draft. If don't set a deadline and not complete it, okay? You have to make sure that whatever it is, you stick to it. So say today is May 18th, and I am going to set a deadline to have my draft completed within 10 days, May 28th. Now, if I set this date, May 28th, no matter what I'm doing that day, on that day, that particular time, no matter what comes up as a family events, dealing with family at home, cooking, whatever time you set for it, that is what you need to do. If that means going out and sit by the water, sitting out on your patio, sitting in your room or your prayer closet, whatever you may choose, make sure that you are sticking to the deadline that you put in place. Because advantages of creating an outline for your book is that you'll have a better sense of how many characters, how many chapters or sections it will contain. This makes it easier to choose an informed deadline to complete your book in total. When you set a deadline for finishing your draft in your Now Novel profile, it automatically calculates when you will finish your book by calculating how many hours you have available for writing weekly. But make sure you choose a realistic deadline. Although success stories prove that it's possible to write a first draft within 30 days, you need to give your novel the time to be fantastic, because this will increase your chance of getting published if you're wanting to go through a publishing company, or this will increase your chances being at the top of the charts when you self-publish it yourself. When you start outlining, the size of the task in front of you may seem overwhelming, especially if this is your first go around. Even if it's your first, second, third, fourth, fifth, it's going to seem overwhelming. So break it down into manageable and smaller increments. Here are tips for drafting a novel faster and more productively. At the start of every writing session, note down where the scene will be set, who it will involve, and what the narrative purpose of the scene will be. For example, London, main character and a new acquaintance, love interest. Scene shows that the character moving closer towards her romantic love objective, but shows some of the challenges that she will need to overcome. Don't stop to edit while writing a first draft. Leave this for the revision step. Do not stop in the middle of you writing to edit as you go. I've done that, and it makes the process a little more difficult and a tad bit longer. You need to leave details out or fill them in using shorthand and add factual